Sup buckaroos. So as you probably know, the story of Genshin Impact is very complex, and it seems like it's going to be very, very long. The main reason we could tell this game is going to be extremely long is because of a single trailer that came out in September of 2020, Travail. The trailer seems to be a sticking point and a lot of theorizing about the community, and for good reason. It foreshadows 8 of the god knows how many chapters the game is going to get in a very literary way that leaves a lot of room open for interpretation. It's just begging for interpretation, honestly. But I haven't seen anybody tackle the entirety of this trailer at once, and because I love this trailer and I love literature, we're going to tackle the entirety of this trailer like it's literature. But before we get into that, let's cover some background for those who aren't familiar with the obscure lore of this game back to front. The Travail trailer is a trailer that came out one day before the game itself came out on September 27th. The name of the trailer, Travail, gives us some interesting insights. Travail has its origins in French. Because English is half French, it naturally made its way into literary English. In French, the word travail means simply a job, where in English it means a painful or laborious effort. We're going to be defining a lot of words in this video, so don't worry. This kind of fits because it pretty well describes what endeavors Aether is going to go through trying to find his sister. Just look at the first 2 chapters of the game where we have to kill a fucking dragon and then a long dead reawoken god. Spoilers. That's a painful and laborious effort if I've ever seen one. A more interesting detail of this trailer is the narrator. At first I thought it was D-Luke because they sound vaguely familiar, but it is not in fact D-Luke. The narrator in this trailer, for those unfamiliar, is this dude named Dainsleif, or Dainsleif, or whatever, Dainsleif, I say Dainsleif. We know this because of the description of the video. It names every character that is presented for each chapter. For the chapter The Dream Yet to be Dreamed, a mysterious character is shown and the description names him as Dainsleif. The reason we know it's Dainsleif narrating is because at the end of the trailer, when talking about Khaenri'ah, the narrator specifically uses the pronouns I instead of using other pronouns as he does for the rest of the video. It's only after he talks about Khaenri'ah that he starts using first-person pronouns. It also helps that Dainsleif's VA was confirmed as Yuri Lowenthal, both officially by miHoYo and on his IMDb. And because Yuri's voice is the only voice we haven't heard in game, whereas literally every other confirmed VA is present somewhere in the game, simple elimination tells us that it's Dainsleif narrating this, as well as every other collected miscellany trailers. What is known about Dainsleif is very little. All we know at this point is that he's from Khaenri'ah, and he has a strange omniscience to him that allows him to know the entire story of the game for some reason, as well as the endeavors of the Traveler. He also has a very strong connection to Lumine, which we'll see in a bit. Now that we have all of that background out of the way, let's actually get into the first few lines of the trailer.
We had no time to say goodbye, so let's not call it that.
So this is the only time Aether ever talks in this trailer. After this, Dainsleif takes over. So what's the purpose of the line here? Well, this entire trailer is supposed to be a way to tease the story of the game, and this single line sums up the broader sense of the story. The last time Aether saw his sister, it wasn't a goodbye because Aether is committed to seeing her one last time. A goodbye implies that they aren't going to see each other again, at least for a while, and that's not what Aether is planning on having happen. Another interesting thing is that Aether is the one speaking here. This goes to solidify that Aether is the canonical survivor of the Unknown Gods attack. In all promotional material miHoYo has thrown out for Genshin Impact, it is shown that Aether is the one that survives, and Lumine is the one that gets captured, or sent back or killed or whatever. This story trailer goes to further confirm that this is the case. That's why in all my theories I'm going to assume that Aether is MC.
The war has already begun. It is just a continuation of past battles.
Yeah, that sounds about right. The Archon War was a war that took place thousands of years ago when Celestia was established, and over the fact that only a few gods could rule in Celestia. The war was a squabble between the plentiful number of gods for one of the few seats in Celestia over Teyvat. What Dainsleif is saying is that these wars are not quite over. The ashes of the war are still smoldering, and tensions that existed immediately after the war are still kind of there. Nobody notices except for the Archons, and the Archons don't want to acknowledge the fact that those ashes are still smoldering.
The gods goad us on with the promise of their 7 treasures, rewards for the worthy, the doorway to divinity.
Here, goad means kind of what you would expect. It means to provoke or annoy us to stimulate some action or reaction. Treasures the goads are goading us with are quite clearly the 7 Gnosises. As far as I can tell, there are no other major treasures that each of the Archon possesses. Actually, during recording, I realized that after each chapter, we get a treasure, a memento of that chapter, the coagulated blood and this thing from this first chapter. And each of these could be the treasures, but I don't think that's the case. Based on what Venti has told us, a gnosis is what deviates a simple person from an archon, and any vision holder is able to obtain a gnosis. It's just that the process to obtain it is quite difficult and is kept secret between the archons. They are rewards for the worthy, and it's the gateway to divinity.
Yet buried in the depths of this world lies smoldering remains, a warning to those that dare trespass.
So here's a very interesting line. This ties back to the smoldering remains I was talking about a few paragraphs before. But to figure out what this is talking about, we need to put a singular word into context, and that word is trespass. Trespassing to where? Well, the next line explains this.
That throne in the sky is not reserved for you.
A very, very important note here is that in the captions, this line is put into quotations. Who Dainslife is quoting here, I can't figure out the life of me, and if anybody knows, please put it in the comments. I really would like to know this. However, this quote still gives us context as to Dainslife's use of trespass in the previous line, even though we don't know who he's quoting. The use of trespass refers to the unauthorized or unwanted passage into Celestia and into godhood. The smoldering remains here are referring to the remains, intentions that haven't cooled down since the Archon War, and those smoldering tensions act as one of many, many warnings of those that are arrogant enough to barge their way into Celestia.
But mortal arrogation never stops. None will escape the flames. See for yourself.
Panic, panic, it's a quote from the unknown god. But actually, this is really interesting that he uses the same phrasing as the unknown god in this line. For those that don't know, which basically includes also Google, to arrogate means to claim or seize without justification. Think like British colonialism. What is mankind arrogating that Dainslife recognizes and the Sustainer despises? Well, I can only assume it's basically all of the multiverse, but that's a theory for another time. Next, Dainslife says, none will escape the flames, which again relates back to the metaphor of smoldering remains that represents this grudge that still exists between the seven as remnants of their time fighting each other. Dainslife is basically recognizing the inevitable truth that these remains will burst into flames and nobody can escape them.
The dragon who defended Mondstadt for a millennium finally faces his perturbation. What does freedom really mean when demanded of you by a god?
This we already know what it means. Same with the next line, but I'm still going to bring up a few things with this line in particular. To be perturbed means to be troubled in mind or feeling or showing agitation. The main bit of that definition is the troubled in mind part. In this chapter, Dvalin was, in fact, troubled in mind and was basically brainwashed by the Abyss Order. He was agitated and was being goaded on by the Abyss Order to betray and attack those that worshipped him before. The second sentence is actually a very interesting question and brings up some very possibly philosophical discussions that, at least for me, will most probably end up resulting into the what is free will discourse, which I'm not qualified at all to talk about.
The god of contracts senselessly slaughtered as his people watched on in horror. In the end, he will sign the contract to end all contracts.
We know what this means. Next.
In the secluded land of the immortal Shogun, the Bakufu rules eternal. But what do mortals see of the eternity chased after by their god?
In this context, secluded kind of acts as a double entendre, where it can mean geographically and politically. As we learn through certain quests, as well as the end of the Geo quest line, Inazuma was shut down with nobody allowed to enter or leave by the Bakufu. This, on top of the fact that Inazuma is the only nation that is supposedly not located on the main continent and is in fact an archipelago, is what makes Inazuma, the land of the Raiden Bakufu, so secluded. We know that Baal is the god of eternity and is probably shaping up to be the first god that actually fights back against what the Fatui are trying to achieve, as without a Gnosis, she cannot continue to be an Archon and can therefore no longer be eternal. We also know that from Zhongli's dialogue that to keep this eternal rule, she has been confiscating every vision in Inazuma and doing something with them that isn't quite clear. So she basically is being a paranoid dictator. But because of this, and from some of the dialogue we get from an Inazuman immigrant, the people of Inazuma don't actually agree with this practice. It might even shape up to be a civil war or civil uprising of some sort against the paranoia of the Bakufu.
The god of wisdom's enemy is wisdom itself, and the oasis of knowledge is a mirage in the desert of ignorance. In the city of scholars, there is a push for folly, yet the god of wisdom makes no argument against it.
Right, so this one has a lot of flowery word choice, so let's break down some of the key vocabulary before tackling the actual message of the two lines. Mirage, an optical illusion caused by atmospheric conditions. Heat waves are an example of a mirage, so are these things. Ignorance, lack of knowledge or information, and folly is the key one, lack of good sense or foolishness. Literally derives from the same French word where fool comes from. So with those words defined, what is the saying? Well, just defining the words doesn't quite give us the entire meaning. This is the god of wisdom after all, so we need to do my favorite thing, defining metaphors. There are 3 metaphors packed into a single phrase. The oasis of knowledge is a mirage in the desert of ignorance. This works kind of like nested folders. The entire desert, which itself could be metaphorical, but could also just as likely be the desert of Sumeru itself, shows its wanderers mirages of an oasis of knowledge. What this tells me is that the people and scholars that are plentiful in Sumeru, being the nation of wisdom and all, are obsessed with finding the supposed oasis of knowledge, an oasis that Dainslife recognizes as an illusion, a fallacy, something that doesn't exist. So if this oasis of knowledge isn't real, then the god of Sumeru, the god of wisdom, surely knows this too. So why would this folly, this false information and foolishness be pushed and spread across the city of scholars without any resistance from the god of wisdom? Because, as Dainslife said, wisdom is his enemy. If his people actually do find this proverbial oasis of knowledge, then that is going to inevitably end in the downfall of the god of knowledge and possibly every other god in Celestia. And who knows what else will happen if humanity finds the answers to literally everything. That's just going to result into another Honkai-like universe.
The god of justice lives for the spectacle of the courtroom, seeking to judge all other gods. But even she knows not to make an enemy of the divine.
This at first glance seems to be quite counterintuitive. This situation puts the god of Hydro in a dilemma. Do you live up to your title and purpose as the god of justice, or do you not get your shit kicked in by the other Archons, namely the Tsaritsa? There's not much to this line aside from the fact that we can gather that the Hydro Archon is probably going to be stuck between a rock and a hard place when it comes to this chapter.
The rules of war are woven in the womb. The victors shall burn bright, while the losers must turn to ash. When the god of war shares this secret with the traveler, it is because she has her reasons.
So when I first heard this, I had the exact same thought you probably did. Well, that's just obvious, right? And yes, saying that somebody does something because of reasons is the most generic and obvious as you can get. The way that Dainslife delivers this is quite important. He's saying it in a way that comes off as intentional. He's not saying it because he doesn't know what her reasons are, but instead is seemingly implying that he knows exactly what her reasons are, and that those reasons are a perfect explanation as to why she shared such a secret with the traveler. Murata, the goddess of war, shares with the traveler the secrets of war. Why would she do that? Maybe because there's a war on the horizon with the Tsaritsa. There's a very high possibility that at this point in the story, the gods know that they are fighting a losing battle, and that there is a very, very low chance that they are going to emerge on the other side as victorious by doing exactly as they are now. I think that the Lady of Fire knows that there isn't much longer, and she shares these secrets of war as a last resort. Whatever these reasons are, they are good ones, and isn't the business of the traveler to know what these reasons are.
She is a god with no love left for her people, nor do they have any left for her. Her followers hope only to be on her side when the day of her rebellion against the divine comes at last.
Weirdly enough, we know what this means just as much as we know what the first two mean. There really isn't any hidden meanings or metaphors in this line. It's cold, straightforward, and just feels like it's pulled out of a Dostoevsky novel. Russian literature, cold and straight to the point. The only thing that this line emits is irony. The fact that the god of love, the one that is supposed to have the most love, has run out of it before any other god has. And her followers share that feeling. They despise each other, but the people know that there needs to come a time to put that hatred aside and be on the side of their lady.
In the perpetual meantime of a sheltered eternity, most are content to live and not to dream. But in the hidden corners where the god's gaze does not fall, there are those who dream of dreaming.
Let's tackle this one again, motherfucker. I have a new context to cover this under, and that context comes from what Scaramuch said in the Theories of the False Sky. Scaramuch, during the Reconciled Stars event, lore bombed us with the fact that the stars in the sky are possibly a hoax, and that it's all a farce. What he means by that, we have yet to find out, and I'm assuming we'll find that out whenever Inazuma comes out, maybe. However, whatever it means, Scaramuch teased that something about the sky in astrology is false. It is hidden even beyond the prying eyes of Mona. So that fact that the sky is false and that the world under the sky is sheltered by the seven gods, we can safely assume that the entirety of Teyvat and the universe that Teyvat exists in is this sheltered eternity that Dainsleif speaks of. But in the corner of the sheltered eternity that passes by the attention of the seven exists a place where the people are different and do not show the quote-unquote symptoms of being a sheltered people. See, I think that for some reason, and this is rather popular theory, that the people of Teyvat are meant to just live and not to dream, as dreaming is dangerous. Dreaming means technological advancement, societal development, and power to mankind. And that's exactly what the gods, and namely the Sustainer, do not want. But there is a place, Khaenri'ah, where the people are starting to dream. To me, dreaming of dreaming, while redundant, also means something. To me, it means that the people of Khaenri'ah are just starting to get the idea that mankind is powerful, and that humans are meant to dream, develop, and be more than just bots that kind of exist for some reason. Is this game actually going to be about a robot uprising? This could mean that the people of Khaenri'ah have free will, where the rest of Teyvat doesn't necessarily have free will, but I can't make this claim with any certainty. That's like some Sans' Nest shit over there.
Some say a few are chosen and the rest are dregs. But I say we humans have our humanity. We will defy this world with a power from beyond.
So, a dregs is defined as the remnants of liquid left in a container together with any sediment or grounds. The choice of words here implies something along the lines of those that are not chosen are no more important than residue, sediment, or earth forgotten at the bottom of a beaker. The second line is what makes me think this chapter might actually be an uprising against somebody, probably the gods, or Dainsleif and others of Khaenri'ah rebel against the gods for one reason or another, because they now know what it's like to be able to dream. What this power from beyond isn't clear, but the energy that surrounds Dainsleif's arm is extremely unfamiliar, and isn't like anything we've seen in the game. We basically can only take huge shots in the dark as to what it is and where it comes from.
Now, you who has set foot in this world, your journey has reached its end, but one final doorway remains.
This line is kind of interesting for the main reason that it isn't immediately clear what he's talking about. Now, I was confused too, but I think he's saying that one final doorway remains because this trailer could be interpreted as Dainsleif retelling and reliving the entirety of the traveler's travels and exploits, his travails up to that point. I'll expand on this point after the next line.
Step forth if you have understood the meaning of your journey. Defeat me, command me to step aside. Show me that you are worthier than I to rescue her. Then, the threads of all fate will be yours to reweave.
Imagine it like this. The Traveler has concluded the Snezhnaya arc, and the Tsaritsa is dealt with. And now he's off to Khaenri'ah, where the enemy of the arc is Dainsleif, just hypothetically. Imagine it's the final boss arena, and the final monologue Dainsleif gives off is this trailer. The travels of Aether at that point are done, save for one final door, that door being the defeat of Dainsleif and the meeting of his sister. That's what these lines mean, but that's unclear when the lines are taken at face value. So what does this talk about the meaning of your journey and the proving Aether is worthier than I to rescue her? Well, that's quite unclear, especially because the only places we've heard of Dainsleif talk is in trailers. He exists nowhere else in the game, and because we also haven't seen Lumine since the start of the game, there are connections here that are very clearly missing and probably won't even catch a vague winds of until much later into the game.
My memory has all but faded completely, but I will always remember how much she too loved these flowers.
These are the final lines of the video, and what they mean is just as vague, if not more than the previous few. But what this implies is that during the time we spent traveling 500 years into the future, on top of what time we spent looking for Lumine, Lumine met Dainslife, and Dainslife got to know Lumine pretty well. It vaguely smells of romance, but again, it's something we'll have to wait and see about. And that's Travail, a trailer with the most lore dumps we've ever gotten in the vaguest way possible through a narrator we know nothing about, but seems to be literally everywhere and also seems to be entirely omniscient. It's very strange, but it's the best we've got when it comes to late game storytelling. I just want to commend MiHoYo for how well they've both written the entire story of this game, as well as this trailer. The fact that they hide lore even in the most mundane of trailers is amazing, and I really hope to see them do much more with this in the future. It's really cool, and I love it when a game company like this gets my theory senses tingling. Well, that's really about it for me for now. The next video I'm planning is a summary of the Chalk Prince and the Dragon, as well as some theories regarding that storyline. So I'll see y'all on the other side of that. Later.